Hello, everybody. My name is Pius Abitegeka, and I currently work at Brunel University. My role here today is to help you navigate today's sessions and introduce the various speakers. So thank you very much for joining the Get You Ready program, week 5 of the study skill sessions. For those of you that joined the prior study skill session from week 1, thank you very much. We do appreciate you being here today from wherever it is that you're joining us from. Just a few things to make you aware of before we start with our first speaker today. The first thing is this session is actually recorded, and you will have access to these recordings over on our webpage, and that should be available from as early as next week. So if you do want to go back and refer back to this meeting, you can obviously do that later on. You also can't interact with the speaker. The only way to ask questions is using the Q&A function of the chat, which should be located somewhere on your screen now. So when the speakers ask you any questions for interactiveness, please do use the Q&A function to type your responses in there. But also you can ask questions throughout the presentation, and the speaker will answer those questions at the end of the presentation. Without further ado, let's get into our first session. This week, we have Andrew Harrison, who's going to talk about using strategies to recognize plagiarism and reference accurately. So over to you, Andrew.
Thanks, Pius. Hi, everyone. Thank you very much for attending this session. Again, it's week 5 study skills, and we're looking at using strategies to recognize plagiarism and reference accurately. We can just very quickly think about what plagiarism means. So plagiarism is using the work of others without providing acknowledgement. So it could be done deliberately, which would mean perhaps a student copying and pasting somebody else's work, or it could be done accidentally because the student hasn't used the correct academic conventions. So the purpose of this session then is to really help you avoid that. We'll just have a quick look at how this session relates to the previous ones that we've had. So as you can see, it's the final session. We previously looked at understanding the title, selecting reading materials and reading critically, and finding your angle and developing your essay. And what we're doing today will link to some of those things. But don't worry if you didn't attend them or haven't watched them, they have been recorded and they're online, so you can look at them later. Okay. We'll have a quick look now and see what is referencing. And so before we do that, we'll just have a quick look at the session aims. So our first aim is to understand the importance of referencing accurately. It's also to learn how to use paraphrasing and direct quotation to avoid plagiarism. And it's to become familiar with using in-text citation and reference lists. I think this particular area can be the most challenging for students in terms of their transition from being sixth form or college students to being first year university students. Quite often they're not sure how to accurately paraphrase or how to do the correct in-text citations. So again, I'm hoping this session will give you a bit more confidence, but also do know that once you're at Brunel, there are lots of people here who will be willing to help you. So there's the Ask team, the academic skills team, who run sessions like this for current students. There are also subject-specific librarians who can help you search for material and again help you with your referencing. And also in Brunel Language Center, we can also provide assistance. So let's look at what referencing means. So firstly, it's using the ideas or words of others. That can be directly in the form of a quotation. That means using the exact words from the source. So you would need to use quotation marks. And if you were using Harvard referencing, you would need to put the page number in the reference as well. It's really important that you're methodical with your note-taking and that you note down all of the information you need for your reference. I remember an experience I had where I found a really brilliant direct quotation in a book, but I forgot to write down the page number. And so later, when I came to do my referencing, I realized I didn't have it and I had to go back to the book. I spent a long time trying to find it, but I couldn't find the exact sentence that I wanted to use, which was a great shame. So do make sure, again, that you note down all the information you need. It's also about using your own words or paraphrasing. And that's what you'll be doing mostly. Mostly you will be paraphrasing rather than using direct quotation. And we'll have a little look about why we do that later. It's also a way to avoid plagiarism. So in-text citations show the source of the information. So in text, you give the author's surname and the year of publication. And then at the end of your essay, you need to have either a reference list or a bibliography that gives further information of the publication or the source material. So we'll look now at 3 reasons why referencing is so important. Firstly, it shows that you've researched your topic. So your tutor can see you're familiar with the main concepts. And not only that you're familiar with them, but that you're able to restate them in your own words, that you clearly understand them, that you've internalized them, and that you can apply them to, for example, you can apply a theory to a real world life situation or to whatever's being discussed in the essay title. It also helps because using the ideas, opinions, and research of others, so using expert information, will strengthen your arguments. Sometimes students kind of have the opposite opinion and they don't like to use source material because they think their arguments will be unoriginal, or it means that they haven't shown their own ideas. But that's the wrong way to look at it. If you were at the previous session where we looked at how to structure a paragraph, you might remember the acronym TEAL, T-E-E-L. So that's having a topic sentence at the beginning of the paragraph. And that's where, again, you state your main argument or the main point that you want to make, your stance. And then the first E is explanation. And you might have some source material in the explanation, but probably it's in the second E, evidence and examples. And that's where you'll really use the source material, because you're showing that your main argument is strong because you have proof, you have evidence, or you're giving a counter argument as well. So you're showing analysis. And then finally, for number 1, you will write better essays if you use referencing correctly and you provide source material. When you're given your essay title, quite often you'll be given a marking rubric, and it will show you what your lecturers expect in terms of using sources. So it's really important to read that carefully, and quite often it will tell you what you need for each grade. So to get an A star, for an A, or for a C, or for an E. So you'll definitely write better essays if you provide that source information and you reference correctly. Secondly, it helps you to avoid plagiarism. So citing your sources shows that you're not trying to pass off the ideas of others as your own. So it shows that you're not cheating. And yeah, this is really important to iterate. Plagiarism is a very serious offense, and it can have severe consequences. So you really want to make sure you're avoiding this. The way that we tend to approach it, though, as well, is that we understand that students don't always understand how to reference correctly or how to avoid it. And our role is to support you in knowing that so you can avoid it. And then finally, number 3, a reference list of your sources can help others to find out more on the subject. And also, likewise, you can use the reference list of your sources to find more information on the topic as well. So that can be really useful. So again, as you're doing your reading, just make sure that you, again, you're methodical and that you take down all the information you need. You know, the name of the source, the author, the year of publication, if it's a book, where it was published, who was the publisher, and again, we'll look at this in a bit more detail a little bit later. So we'll now look at what information needs to be referenced. So you must reference quotes and summaries of ideas. And again, if you're using a quote, you must have the correct punctuation, the quotation marks, and the page number. You also need to reference diagrams and images. Again, the reader needs to know where you got this information from. Can they trust this diagram? Is it likely to be accurate? You may also need to reference video and audio, depending on what you're writing about, or statistics, and basically anything that is not your own work. Brunel University Library, on their webpage, has some really useful information in terms of how to reference these different types of sources. Because it can seem a bit random sometimes. Sometimes if it's a website, you might not have the name of the author, or it might not give you the date it was published. So again, there are ways to reference in that case, and I definitely recommend using the Brunel University Library website. However, you don't need to reference your own ideas and research, and things that are generally known to be true, general knowledge, general facts, also don't need to be referenced. We've got a couple of examples here. So water boils at 100 degrees, sun rises in the east. There might be other very basic theories that don't need to be referenced as well. Let's practice this now. I'm going to show you here on the screen. We can see some information. Let's have a quick read through and look at it, and let's think about which of these things would need to be referenced in the sources shown and which ones wouldn't. So, number one, temperatures on Earth are generally higher the nearer you go to the equator. Number two, the 20 warmest years on record have been in the past 22 years. Number three, climate change has been shown to increase the risk to life on Earth. And then number four, we have a line chart, a line graph. So just have a quick think. Which ones would you definitely need to reference and show the source, and which ones wouldn't you need to? Okay, and we'll quickly check our answers. Okay, so for the first one, temperatures on Earth are generally higher the nearer you go to the equator. So no, you wouldn't need to provide a reference. It's a well-known fact. Number two, the 20 warmest years on Earth, sorry, the 20 warmest years on record have been in the past 22 years. So yes, you would need to provide the source. This is from collected data, so you'd need to have an in-text citation and an end of reference as well. Number three, climate change has been shown to increase the risk to life on Earth. So yes, again, you would need to provide evidence for that. How do we know that that statement is true? And then finally, number four, we've got that diagram. So again, we need to know who created the diagram. Is it reliable or accurate? Can we trust it? So providing a reference would be really important in that case as well. So we'll now look then at some strategies that we can use to avoid plagiarism. The first strategy we're going to look at is paraphrasing, which means putting the original source into your own words. So most referencing in academic essays is paraphrased. This is because, again, you need to show critical thinking. You need to show you're able to take information and put it into your own words. So it's not a good idea to over-rely on direct quotations. If you do that, the lecturer might think that you're trying to pad out the essay, that you're just trying to increase your word count. And also, by overusing direct quotations, you're not showing necessarily that you understand it and that you have internalized it and that you can state it in your own words. So most often you'll be using paraphrasing. So that, again, so paraphrasing is someone else's ideas, theories, or research, borrowed from a source, rewritten in your own words, with a clear citation showing the source. And again, it should be true to the original author's ideas, but is in your own words and sentence structure. So let's have a look at the example we've got at the bottom of this slide, and let's see how effective the paraphrase is. So on the left, we have the source text, and then on the right, we have the paraphrase, and it's highlighted in yellow. So the original source material says, progress has been slower than was anticipated. And then in the paraphrase, it says, progress in the area has not been as rapid as expected. So we can say it's okay as a paraphrase. There's been some change there. They've used synonyms. They've used words with similar meanings. So instead of slower, they've got not as rapid. Instead of anticipated, they've got expected. But perhaps they could have changed it a bit more in terms of the structure. Maybe the word progress as well could have been changed. Okay, let's think now though about the advantages of paraphrasing. So one, the process helps you to understand and remember the content. Two, information is reorganized to support your arguments and therefore reflect your voice in the writing. I mentioned earlier how that's sometimes a concern of students, that if they use too much source material, then they're not actually showing their own position. So again, by structuring your work in such a way, you can avoid that. You can have your own strong argument, your own voice, and then you're using the source material as support to back up your opinions. And then number three, it shows that you've understood the source material. And again, because you can restate it in your own words, you're showing that understanding. You're not just repeating it and copying and pasting it as a direct quotation. So it is a really good thing to do. But it's something that takes time. In previous sessions, I spoke about the importance of planning in terms of when you're going to complete your assignment and breaking your assignment down into subtasks and planning when you're going to complete each subtask. Sometimes when students fail to do that and they leave their assignment until the end or till near the submission date, they run out of time, and paraphrasing can take time. It's probably one of the most complex parts of writing, because you've got to understand what's in the source material and really change that and put it into your own words. So make sure that you don't leave your essay until the last minute. Make sure you give yourself plenty of time to write it so that you can paraphrase effectively and so that you can edit and have time to edit your work and really check it before you submit. But we'll now look then at the stages of paraphrasing and how you can paraphrase effectively. So number one, read the passage several times. In the second session about critical reading, we spoke about the importance of reading effectively and the different reading techniques that you can use. So make sure that you are only reading what you need to read, that you're not reading journal articles that are not relevant. So make sure you find the key passage and then read it several times to make sure you've understood it. Number two, make notes of the key concepts in your own words. This is really useful because you're already beginning the process of paraphrasing as you're reading. And then number three, write the paraphrase. And it's good if you're not looking at the original while you do that. So kind of hide the book or hide the source, write your paraphrase. And then number four, when you've finished, compare your paraphrase with the original and make any changes if it's too similar. Also check that you haven't changed the meaning, which can be easy to do actually, because when you use synonyms, even though the words are similar, they can have slightly different meanings. So again, make sure that it's not too similar, but also that you haven't changed the meaning. Finally, you need to cite the source. You need to put the in-text citation. So again, the author's surname and year of publication. Okay. Again, it can be tricky. So we'll look now at, again, some strategies to help you make your paraphrases more successful and effective. So number one, start the paraphrase at a different point to the original. So for example, you might have a long sentence as the original. In your paraphrase, begin in the middle of that original sentence. So the middle point of the original sentence becomes the beginning of your paraphrase. Number two, keep the meaning the same. So again, that might seem basic, it might seem obvious, but it's very easy to slightly change it. You could, if you haven't read it carefully or you haven't understood it, you could misinterpret what the original source stated. So do make sure you keep the meaning the same. Number three, use synonyms or similar words to substitute for keywords and phrases. And you can also use the different word family. So the part of speech, you could change the part of speech and that can help you as well. For number four, break up long sentences or combine shorter ones. And then finally, number five, don't add or take out any information. So a paraphrase is different to a summary. A summary is when you really condense the information and you make it much shorter, but a paraphrase, it will be roughly the same length as the original source. Okay, so we're going to practice this now. We're going to see if we can identify an effective paraphrase. What I'd like you to do is to read the paragraph on the screen and then to read the two paraphrases and think about which one is best. Let's have a quick read now. So again, you're judging this in terms of, is it too similar? Is it too different? Has it changed it? Let's have a look at the next screen and we'll see which one is the best. So we can see that paraphrase one has used too many similar expressions. They haven't really used synonyms and it's too similar to the original. So even though there is a reference at the end, you could argue that it still would be plagiarism. Whereas paraphrase 2 has come in at a slightly different point to the original, and it still has the same meaning, but it's the student has written it in their own words, so it's more effective. So yeah, paraphrase 2 is better. Okay, so far we've looked at paraphrasing as a strategy for avoiding plagiarism. We're now going to look at using direct quotations. I said before how you should mostly use paraphrasing, but that doesn't mean you can't use direct quotation, and sometimes it will be more effective to do so. So indirect quotation, you copy another person's exact words and enclose them in quotation marks. And quotation must be for a good reason. So for example, it could be a definition or part of a definition. So that might occur in the introduction or in the background section of your essay. It could be because you want to incorporate a theory, a law, a regulation or principle into your essay. And again, a direct quotation could be effective. It could be a specific term or expression created by the author. Or it could be a particularly effective, powerful, or controversial statement. So imagine if you have the original source and the writer used alliteration, so where the first letter of the words begins with the same letter. So maybe you have all of the words begin with the letter A. That might sound really powerful or effective, and you might not want to lose that. So in that case, it could be more effective to use the direct quotation rather than a paraphrase. Or it might be because there's a text that is being discussed, so for example in law or literature, and you need to refer to it. So again, a quotation would be good in that case. In some subjects, so for example law, direct quotation is much more common than in others. So here we've got the example of business. So this is when the exact words are more important than the main idea. Great, so we'll now look then at some common issues with using direct quotations. So the first one is using a quotation that's not special enough. So we've got an example here from Casanti 2004, and here it reads, so it states that organs such as the heart, liver, small bowel, pancreas, and lungs are used for transplants. So again, it's quite a simple idea, probably should have been paraphrased. There was no need for it to be a direct quotation. Secondly, using a quotation that does not directly support the argument. So here we've got the main benefit of organ transplant is that it saves lives. And then we've got the quote to support that. But as you can see, the part in bold in the quote where it begins but doesn't really support the fact that it saves lives. It's at a different point. So that didn't need to be included there. Thirdly, not introducing or showing clearly why a quotation has been used. So the quote needs to be seamlessly included in the essay and relevant to your argument. A common mistake that students make is to have a direct quote as a complete sentence from beginning to end. So you need to introduce the quote with some kind of introduction. So Smith states that, and then have the quote there. And then finally, number 4, too many direct quotes in your essay and you will lose your voice. It becomes a collection of other people's ideas and you may not be critically engaging in the topic. So again, these are the common issues with them. Now that we've looked at paraphrasing and direct quotes, let's look at how you complete the in-text citations. So for a paraphrase, you need the author's surnames and the year of publication. And for the quote, again, you need the same, the author's surname and the year of publication, but you also need the page number. So we can see that there. Let's have a look at this within an example in an essay. If we go to the next slide. Thank you. So in an essay, you can see here in the first paragraph, at the end of the paragraph, it's highlighted in purple. You've got the author's surnames and then a comma and the year of publication. So that's in the main body of the text. And then in the references, you've got the full information. A common mistake that students make is to put information that should be in the final references into the main body of the essay. So for example, the author's initials. But here for a book, as you can see highlighted in pink on the right, you've got the author's surname and initial, you've got the date of publication, the name of the book, the edition, the place of publication, and the name of the publisher. And again, it can be tricky remembering what you need for the references. There are apps you can use. Not that I'm recommending necessarily doing that. I think first it is really useful to learn how to do it yourself anyway. And again, the Brunel University Library website has some really good resources for that. Okay. And then, yeah, in terms of citing sources in text, including them in the reference list, remember all the sources referred to in your essay must be listed at the end under references. There will be more information required in the reference list, such as the full title of the publication and the publisher, and I just went over some of those things as well. And this is really key at the bottom here. There are different styles of referencing, such as Harvard, MLA, and APA, and your academic department will instruct you in which style to use. So very often it is Harvard, which we've had a look at today, but not always. There are some other departments that use the other versions. In the law school, they use Oscular, which is very different. In some of the departments, they'll actually let you choose which one you use. So you just need to make sure you use it correctly and consistently, that you don't jump between the different referencing systems. Okay, so we can just sum up what we've looked at today then. So in terms of our main points from today, only use direct quotations for a good reason. So again, because it's for analysis or comment, introductory summary to show understanding before the direct quotation. Paraphrase is not simply changing a couple of words. So again, make sure the source material is supporting your arguments. Change word classes and use synonyms or use antonyms. And change the order of information, but not the meaning. And then finally, citation and referencing are essential. And again, really important to show opinion, supporting evidence, whether it's fact or further information. Yeah, so that's what we've looked at today. I hope it was useful. It's kind of an introduction into this topic. There's lots more that could be said. And again, when you arrive at Brunel, there's lots of training given in this area. So I'm happy to take any questions now.
Thank you very much, Andrew. That was a very, very great presentation. I hope the students really found that very helpful. I know I certainly would have found it helpful when I was joining university. So at this point, I would like to encourage all students to really think about some of the questions you want Andrew to answer for you and type those questions out in using the Q&A chat, and we can get those questions answered. In the meantime, Andrew, I have a few questions here. I'm hoping that perhaps you can address these to start with whilst we wait for some more student questions to come in. The first one here is, can you ever write a piece of work that is 100% free of plagiarism?
Really good question. So when you submit your work at Brunel, it'll be done online through the VLE, the virtual learning environment that we use. And it will actually scan your work when you submit it to see how similar it is to other assignments that have been uploaded to Brunel, but other universities around the UK. It will check the internet as well. It will search different places online. And it will kind of say how similar it is to other pieces of work. What's really important to state is that it's not a numbers game necessarily. You could have a student who had maybe it comes up, for example, 15% similarity, but because they've followed all of the academic conventions, and because they've done all the referencing correctly, their bibliography is correct, the in-text citations are correct, it's all good, it's fine, even though it's got this 15%. Whereas you could have a student who only has 5%, but they haven't followed those academic conventions. Maybe they haven't done correct in-text citations. So what I would say is it shouldn't be that you have students who have whole paragraphs or whole sentences that are very similar to other work. Because if you're writing something yourself, naturally you'd be choosing different things. It's very unlikely it would be exactly the same. So that's what I would say about that.
Andrew,
Just
is there like a threshold in terms of what is acceptable, what is seen to be?
yeah, I mean, again, I wouldn't like to say so just because the most important thing is that you're doing everything correctly, that you're using correct in-text citations, that you're using correct, having a correct bibliography at the end. I spoke in the session about not overusing direct quotations. So that could be an issue. If your essay is just simply, again, a collection of other people's ideas that you've compiled, that wouldn't be appropriate. But no, I'd be reluctant to give a certain percentage because it really can depend. What I would say, again, there are different cultures in terms of academic referencing around the world, and there are different rules. So in some countries, for example, you're allowed to have 20% of your essay come from other sources, and you don't need to reference it. So sometimes international students, when they arrive in the UK, they're not aware of the academic conventions in the UK, and they're not aware of how to reference correctly. So it's more about learning that and doing things correctly than thinking about a certain percentage.
Brilliant. Thank you, Andrew. You have lots of students saying thank you here in the chat. So clearly you're doing an amazing job there. Again, I would like to encourage you to type in your questions you do have in the Q&A function. We can get Andrew to give you guys a response. And one of the questions that has come in, Andrew, students asked, we will be able to see a module essay that demonstrates how to effectively support our argument in essays?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think it really depends on the department and the module. So I think in some departments, yes, they may give you a model essay, and that can be useful. In other departments, they might not want you to have a model essay. One of the dangers of using model essays is that you become a prisoner to it, and that you think your essay has to be structured in exactly the same way or be similar to that. And it may be the case that some of you would be able to write better essays than the model that you're looking at, but because you look at the model, you're kind of constricted by it. So if they do have model essays available, then that might be useful, but don't worry if they don't. Make sure that you understand, again, what the title is asking you for, and that you understand how to approach the essay. And you may be able to go to your personal tutor and ask questions if you're really not sure. And again, there are resources available at Brunel. You've got the Ask team, the academic skills team, who are really helpful and friendly and will be able to help you with supporting your arguments and structuring your work. And you've got Brunel Language Centre as well, particularly if you're an international student or EU student and need help with the language.
Andrew, would you also say that perhaps one of the biggest resources is other students as well, because you can obviously use your friends, your flat colleagues and stuff like that to get an idea of what they have written, especially those that might be, I don't know, in year 2, for example, as you join in year 1. But would you advise speaking to people who are doing your course in a higher level?
Yes and no. Yes and no. So again, it's an interesting question. In terms of working with your peers in the same year group, I think that's really useful. Studying together, taking notes, sharing your notes can be useful. But again, you've still got to be careful in terms of plagiarism. You don't want somebody who's studying with you now to have their essay to be too similar to yours. So although it can be useful, I would never share a draft of my work with another student, probably. I might maybe briefly let them see a paragraph, or I might talk over some of the ideas, but I wouldn't send them. I wouldn't want them to have my exact essay. And then that leads into speaking with people in the higher years, the years ahead, who've already maybe completed these assignments. You'd need to be careful because, again, you wouldn't want to commit plagiarism. You wouldn't want your essay to be too similar to theirs. It may be the case that there are different titles this year, so that wouldn't be an issue, and you could maybe have a look at an example that might help you. But as I said before, even if they did well, you might be able to do better. And by looking at their work, it might make you think, oh, that's the only way to structure it, or that's the only way to write it, whereas it may not be the case, and you might have actually been better off not looking at it and just doing it yourself. So it really does depend.
Brilliant. I thought that might be the case. Thank you very much, Andrew. Another question was, just a reminder here for the students that are still with us, please do use the Q&A function of the chat to ask Andrew any questions that you can think of. This is really your time to get as much information as you can, so do use this time. But in the meantime, Andrew, another question here is, what tools can you perhaps point students to in regards to writing, referencing rather?
Yes, so I mentioned that there are different apps you can use. You have to be really careful with this though, because there can be glitches, or maybe even the app isn't that great and it hasn't done it correctly. So if you do use an app, do make sure that you know how to reference correctly and you're able to check that the referencing has been done correctly. There's an app called RefWorks, which students have been known to use. There are apps like this that you can use where, for example, if you have the book, you can scan the book, the barcode of the book, and it will generate the reference for you, which can save time. Using the Brunel University Library as well, using their website is really great, because on the website, when you find your source, there's a little quotation mark symbol that you can click. And if you click on that, it will generate the citation for you, and it will ask you which referencing system you're using. So it will ask you if you want Harvard or one of the other systems as well. So you can choose that and it will do it automatically. But again, as I said, I think it's really good if you understand how to do the references yourself, and if you're able to do them, so you can check and you're not overly relying on technology. I haven't used it too much myself, but I'm aware of an app you can use, or an application you can use that's really useful. It's called Mandely, and that can help you organize your research. It can help you have different folders, because if you're not organized on your laptop or on your computer, you might have files all over the place and you might get really lost in terms of saving articles and chapters from books and so on. So you can use a system like Mandely that will help you organize your sources, and it can also help you find other sources. It will help you find similar sources to those that you've already identified. So yeah, there are lots of things online, and again, there's training that you'll receive when you arrive at Brunel to help you with this.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Andrew. Again, students, do feel free to ask questions. And let's have a look. Have we got a question? How do you reference websites, Andrew?
Yes, so it depends what type of website it is. For example, if it's a news website or if it's a blog, it might be slightly different. The principle is still the same, though, as what we looked at before in terms of identifying who the author is, and if you can provide their surname and initials, the name of the website. If it's an article online, the name of the article. And then you'd also need to provide the website address and the date that you accessed the website address. There may be some other information that I've just missed from there. So again, it's always really important to check everything you absolutely need and the order you need to present it as well. Quite often on websites, it won't give you the name of the author or the date, and there are ways of doing that. You can either put the name of the website, or if it doesn't give you the date, you can put ND. But again, do check on the Brunel University Library website. It has all that information in terms of how to source a book with 2 authors, or with 3 authors, or more than 4 authors, how to do the references, for a source that is a chapter within a book, or a website, or conference proceedings. There are lots of different kind of random sources and different challenges you'll come across. So again, there are lots of resources that can help you with that.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Again, we have Andrew for another 2-3 minutes, so please do ask any last final minute questions if you have any using the Q&A chat. Andrew, how many references are enough, or how do you know how many references to use?
Yeah, that's a really good point. It would depend on the word count, and it may even depend on the subject you're studying and what you're writing about. So I don't want to give maybe a specific number. I mean, I'd imagine, let's say you're doing a 2,000 word essay, I'd imagine you'd want to have at least 10 sources, for example, and you'd want to have um, a good range of sources, so maybe roughly 50-50 in terms of the ratio between books and journal articles.
Thank
But
you.
again, that don't take that as the final word, because it can be slightly different. There again, check with your department. Try and know what the person marking it wants as well. It really can depend on different things.
Yeah, I mean, these are really good questions to ask your lecturer, I guess, during when they hand out these essays. And I know you've touched this a little bit, Andrew, but perhaps you can clarify a little bit. Are references included in your word count, in your total word count? And is that the same across the board?
Um, Again, this can be different because it depends on the type of referencing system you're using. So I believe, for example, for law students, when you're using Oscular, um, again, you'd need to check. I think the footnote information can count in the word count, so you have to be careful with that. Whereas maybe in other ones it doesn't. So again, really check with the department, and it can depend as well on the type of system you're using, whether you're using Harvard or the other ones. So again, that would be a really good question and something that you would need to check in terms of whether they're included. Basically, the word count is normally everything from the introduction to the conclusion. So for example, if you were doing a dissertation and you had a table of contents, that wouldn't be included in the word count.
Brilliant. Thank you very much for that clarification. That brings us to the end of this Q&A. Thank you very much, Andrew.